It was as if I subconsciously pulled out the dagger from my sleeve and stabbed it through the tyrant's hand. He let me go. I collapsed on the ground, coughing and gasping for air. It was only when I saw his blood-stained hand did I realize what I had done. The feeling of impending death washed over me, but there was no time for panic or fear, because the suffocation had left me dizzy and lightheaded. And I passed out. I thought that even if I were to wake up, it would definitely be in a dark and dingy cell. But when I open my eyes, what I see is the dimly lit palace lit by candlelight. I get up from the bed, see several acupuncture needles left on my arm. It looks like a royal physician has been to see me. I pull out those needles and take a look out of the compartment. I'm still in the Hall of Diligent Government. The entire Grand Hall is eerily quiet. The mess is still untouched. The candle in the corner has burned to half, its dripping tears slowly falling. A wisp of sandalwood incense dissipates from the burner into the vast and dimly lit hall, unable to disperse the bloody smell. The tyrant, his back towards me, sits lazily on the steps alone, fiddling with the dagger in his hand. His own wound has not been bandaged yet, blood soaking his clothes. I pause, unsure whether to approach or retreat. As if he has eyes in the back of his head, he casually asks, "Awake?" I hasten to kneel before him, apologizing. I say that stabbing him was my fault, and I'm willing to accept punishment. This incident has nothing to do with the Liu family. There's no reaction from him. After a long while, I tentatively raise my head to look at him. The tyrant still quietly holds the dagger, his silhouette glowing faintly under the candlelight. His eyelashes hang low. In the depths of his pupils, the faint candlelight is reflected, his expression cold and weary, with an enduring air of weariness towards the world. For a moment, I feel like he is actually an extremely handsome man. Beauty lying in the bone, his face may be ugly, but his bone structure is uniquely stunning, bringing about an unexpected sense of marvel. After I finish talking, he finally responds, "This is the knife 15 secretly gave you." It was one of the birthday gifts that my mother gave me when I turned 16. Such plain words strike me like a bolt of lightning. When I was in despair, someone once lent me a hand. That person I will never forget. But I'm very ashamed I didn't recognize him. I never imagined that the king in front of me, who seemed like a ruthless demon, was the same young man who was once noble and kind, with a face as beautiful as jade. Finally, I realized why, when I was pushed to fall in front of him, he was able to see at a glance that I was not Liu Shi. I didn't recognize him, but he still remembered me. He remembered my name was Atao. Atao is a child without a father, a girl protecting her mad mother alone. That's what he learned when he was 15. A beggar who almost starved to death on the street in search of her insane mother, who was so pitiful and in such a plight. How could she possibly be the same person as the pampered Liu Shi from Liu family? During this period, he must have already seen through all my secrets. I thought he would take back the dagger because it is related to his past. The cold blade in his hand gave me the illusion that things were coming back to their origin. But the black-clad emperor, holding the slightly old dagger, wiped it on a clean corner of his robe, wiped off his blood on it, and gave it to me. His voice was soft and light. "This knife, with its shiny hilt, you must carry it with you at all times. You must cherish and love it. Since it was given to you, it's yours. Keep it well." Knowing that this was a birthday gift given by his mother, I was a little embarrassed to take it. He looked at me a few times, finally stood up, walked slowly to me, pulled me up, and placed the sheathed dagger in my palm, gripping it with my delicate hand. He was completely different from the madness and tyranny just now. His hand was slender, pale, and cold. For the first time, I was so close to him, close enough to smell the faint sandalwood scent underlying his bloody aroma. Close enough to smell the faint sandalwood scent underlying his bloody aroma. The supposedly brutal tyrant, a killer without remorse, told me, take it, cherish it. Precious things should be treated with care. His mother had given him countless birthday gifts, among which it was just a trivial one. But for me, this was the only one that mattered. That's why he left it to me. Go back, he ordered. Turning his back towards me, he picked up the blood-stained longsword from the ground. He cut out a cloth piece and carefully wiped the sword clean, apparently having no intention to pry into the fact that I had stabbed him. If he had wanted to retaliate, he wouldn't have called for a doctor for me. However, he didn't seem inclined to take care of the wound on his hand either. Blood was still oozing out from it. Although a doctor had just checked him, he didn't let anyone nurse his injuries and didn't show the slightest discomfort throughout the examination. Summoning up my courage, I reminded him of his wound. The tyrant paused. He casually tore off a strip of cloth and carelessly bandaged himself. I didn't understand, but I didn't want to pry further. I took a few steps back and walked around the screen. Gathering my courage, I backtracked and cautiously asked him, "Your Majesty, where did the 15th older brother go previously?" Having spent so much time in the palace, I had never seen him, the closest subordinate who once rarely left the young master's side. The tyrant ceased his sword cleaning. He didn't look at me, but lowered his gaze. His face remained expressionless, his voice calm and indifferent. He's dead. He died somewhere very close to him, trampled to pieces by horses, all while he remained oblivious. I don't remember how I made it out of the imperial study. As autumn deepened, the roadside plants started to wither. Red leaves scattered everywhere, swirling into the hem of my skirt with the breeze, embedding into the rippling lake under the moonlight. Back then, I didn't know his name was Gu Liu. I later found out that Gu Liu often journeyed to the west, and his final destination was Luo City. This was the route he took when he was exiled years ago. Throughout his journey, he executed many people and even massacred the camp outside Luo City. Public opinion claimed that his moods were unpredictable, and he slaughtered the innocent indiscriminately. Guilty or innocent, only the deceased themselves knew. Gu Liu was cruelly humiliated and oppressed in Luo City. He was constantly surveilled, insulted, and beaten. He was forced to hobble on broken legs, taunted by beggars till he almost died, his face disfigured by rats, and his mother's jade plaque was stolen. He survived by imitating madness to lower his enemies' vigilance. He lived this way until he heard of the death of 15 as a casual joke made by others. When the border was in chaos and Luo City was almost captured, Gu Liu seized the opportunity to escape. He rescued a few of his scattered old divisions and rushed to the capital with deep resentment, planning to avenge his enemies even if it meant mutual destruction. The group did not dare to take official roads and made their way across mountains and ridges. At their most distressed moment, they met an old man pierced by an arrow. Some recognized him as a renowned local healer. The healer was in Luo City offering volunteer medical services and was shot with an arrow while fleeing from the war. He was at death's door when they found him. Gu Liu at that time had become numb and indifferent with little kindness left. Yet the man was a doctor who had saved lives. Gu Liu looked at the old man for a long while and finally chose to help him. The group pooled their remaining food and medicine and managed to revive the doctor. Once awake, the healer thanked them. He then drugged them all with a pot of soup and took them back to his mansion. His mansion was lush and beautiful, but under its surface lay stacks of skeletons. The renowned philanthropist from afar was in fact a madman who used humans as test subjects for his medical research. He didn't care about human lives or anything else, only about concocting the best prescriptions. He thought Gu Liu had unyielding character, making him an ideal test subject. He believed Gu Liu wouldn't die easily and disrupt his research. Gu Liu and his old divisions became the doctor's test subjects. His companions died or committed suicide under brutal torture, while Gu Liu was left alone, kept in a dark room with poisonous insects and rats for company. Days felt like years. Gu Liu endured this for several years. Every time the doctor thought he was about to die and ready to bury him, the silent young man would pull through, as if living solely to stay alive, even if his existence was a living hell. Gu Liu patiently hid for many years, grasped the layout of the mansion, gained the doctor's trust, and eventually escaped alive. Once outside, the world had drastically changed. The war was far-reaching and wreaked havoc everywhere. The old emperor was secluded in the palace and paid no heed to political affairs. The queen had still not ascended the throne, and the prince, considered wasteful, was ineffective. The vassals were increasingly disloyal, officials chose their allegiances, and public uprisings were relentless. Gu Liu managed to court the allegiance of several generals who had been mentored by General Ye. Amidst the chaos, he nurtured his army with warfare, expanding his power incrementally before making his way back to the capital. Sun Guifei and the Prince of An were both slain by his own hands. He stepped into the emperor's sleeping quarters, carrying the heads of the two, witnessing the once imposing emperor withering into a frail old man who was tremblingly drafting an edict of abdication. The old emperor had no trace of anger for being forced into abdication. Instead, he was full of gratification as he looked at him. Good, Liu, you are indeed my Liu. Amidst the chaos, you alone pacified the world amidst the various contending forces. However, as he approached against the light and saw the terrible scar on his face, the stench of blood on his clothes, and his eyes as cold as dead springs, the old emperor froze. How could you have become like this? He seemed more like talking to himself. When Gu Liu attacked the imperial palace, the old emperor ordered his men to retreat and put up no resistance. He was just waiting for him on his throne. Then Gu Liu finally understood the reason why. It turns out that his mother hadn't actually committed suicide in the cold palace. After all, a woman who had accompanied her father to battle wouldn't be someone who'd give up easily when faced with adversity, right? That was a justification for the public. His mother, the Empress Ye, was actually imprisoned in a house located in the outskirts of the capital. For some unknown reason, the old emperor didn't want to kill her, and even occasionally visited her. Empress Ye, with her wings clipped, was detained in that house for many years. When Sun Guifei learned of this, she frequently sent people to torment her, causing Empress Ye to fall ill. Due to the excessive stress, a minor illness turned into a severe one, and she eventually died in the courtyard she could never leave. After her death, the old emperor seemed to have suddenly realized his love for her, and also became aware of Sun Guifei's malice. He began to regret hurting his wife, who once had eyes only for him, bringing about hatred in her last few years. He blamed Sun Guifei for the death of Empress Ye and began to loathe her, repeatedly putting off the promise to make her the queen and the Prince of An the crown prince. He began to feel full of guilt, was self-deprecating, and lacked interest in politics. He spent his days in a drunken stupor in the palace where Empress Ye once lived. Later, as the situation changed, Gu Liu tossed the heads of his beloved consort and the prince at his feet, which the old emperor didn't care about. He voluntarily abdicated, saying that he wanted to be buried next to his deceased wife in the imperial mausoleum. The old emperor was still talking about his wish to be buried together when he failed to notice that Gu Liu's eyes had already reddened, and the murder intent was clear on him. It turned out that Empress Ye didn't commit suicide in the cold palace. She died from illness in that mansion. When she died, Gu Liu was suffering as a medicine man, and was about to escape. He had missed her by just a bit. It turned out that if he had been slightly faster, he could have seen his own mother. If he had escaped a bit quicker and returned to the capital a bit faster, he could have saved his mother. With a scornful laugh, Gu Liu raises his hand to chop off his own father's head, just like the gruesome death of the other two people. He then flings his father's body to be lashed and left to the dogs, while the body of Empress Yi is moved and buried in the Yi family ancestral tomb. That day, Gu Liu killed so many people, drenching the entire imperial palace with blood. His ruthless methods, coupled with the killing of his father and brother, disregarding the consequence, earned him the reputation of a tyrant, even though his ascension to the throne was technically legitimate due to the abdication decree left by the previous emperor. His previous leg injury was long healed, but because it was treated too late, it resulted in a later syndrome. When it was cold, he would feel bouts of severe pain. Gu Liu was indeed a tyrant. He treated human life as nothing. When people sneered at his horrid face, or when the old wound on his leg throbbed, his mood would worsen and he'd become more cruel and bloodthirsty. No one noticed that every time he raged and killed in a frenzy, he wasn't himself, like a rabid beast filled with murderous intent. This was due to the lingering poison in his body. Gu Liu had taken a mess of various drugs as a guinea pig. It was a mix of different toxins that was hard to get rid of and would flare from time to time, even impairing his sanity during intense episodes. He knew about it, but he chose to ignore it. All his enemies were dead. His family members were also dead. He was like a wandering soul in this world with no aims, no bearings. He knew that his excessive cruelty would backfire eventually. He could solve issues in a more gentle way, but he didn't care. He was indulgent to his savage nature, murdering, because he didn't love his subjects, and he didn't love himself. During his downfall, those he saved persecuted him. Those who saved him also harmed him. Everyone trampled over him. He had witnessed too much of the ugliness of human nature, and it made him weary of everything and everyone. He sat on the highest throne among men, with the emperor's seal that commanded wind and rain, clothed in a dragon robe crafted by skilled artisans. But his countenance marred. Beneath the dragon robe, his body was scarred. His health was deteriorating due to the drug remnants, rotting from the inside, just like a rotten wood. His inside was broken, ripped and torn. Everyone feared the tyrant. No one remembered that he was once the beloved prince, adored by all. That evening, as I returned from the palace office, I dreamt about myself, Gu Liu, and Shi Wu in our younger days. A teenager, tall and handsome, with an air of elegance, brushed away the white pony nibbling at his hair, his gaze constantly falling on a pitiful, ragged little beggar. He said, "Don't hit her." He also said, "Shi Wu, help her find it." Then he got into the carriage and disappeared into the mass of people. Shi Wu had a smile that was always ready, kindly like that of an older brother. He laughed and responded to his peer, "Of course I'm scared. That's why I'm running away." Having said that, he ran off far into the distance, with two people chasing after him, disappearing into the crowds. From then on, the world changed. The years slipped away unnoticed. The luminescent Gu Liu and the lively Shi Wu were no longer seen. Like leaves falling into the folds of a skirt, sinking into the lake, they vanished without a trace under the light of the moon. It seemed like whenever the end of autumn rolled around and everything withered, the sky would always be overcast. Upon my return from the palace of diligent government, I suddenly felt chilled to the bone. I took out the gray rabbit from the corner and curled up to sleep with it in my arms. The rabbit was very well behaved, although it was not used to it. It did not struggle, providing faint warmth. The next day, I found Liu Xirong and asked her bluntly, Did you bribe the palace maid in Liu Xian's palace to force me to go to the angered emperor to meet my death, right? She was caught off guard before she could put on her gentle smile. Her face froze at my question, and she stared at me in surprise. How did you know? She did not deny it, which meant she admitted to it. The coldness of late autumn wafted over, and I felt it seep into my heart. It was the tyrant who had it investigated thoroughly. The old eunuch told me that the emperor did indeed suffer from a recurring headache. When it struck, he would lose control of his tempe, and anyone who came to deliver medicine would never return. The palace had always arranged for death row prisoners to handle this risky task. None of the palace women liked to approach the emperor except for those twin beauties who had plotted to assassinate him. Someone took advantage of me being isolated in the palace, deaf to outside information, bribed Liu Xian's palace maid, intercepted the medicine that day, set me up to die, and then blamed it all on Liu Xian. That person was Liu Shirong, whom I once trusted and thanked. She was warm and friendly, and I was always grateful for her treating me as a real sister, as a family member. When the old eunuch asked how to deal with Liu Shirong, I had a needle in hand, embroidering a winter sleeve for her. I pricked my finger as my mind drifted off, the stinging sensation spreading across my hand. I was used to it. I wiped the blood on the pattern that had taken countless days and nights to embroider, personally ruining the lifelike blossoms. I didn't answer. I wanted to ask her myself. Without any struggle, Liu Shirong admitted it and abruptly stopped feigning closeness. In a cynical laugh, she tore apart the handkerchief I embroidered for her. That's right. I was always lying to you. Who cares about your raggedy trinkets? When Liu Shirong was little, her birth mother was chased from the household. Her legitimate mother treated her neither good nor bad, and basically ignored her. Her father only paid her a rare amount of attention when she was praised by her teacher for her exceptional grades, or when her skills won applause at events. So, from a young age, she studied hard, excelling in music, chess, literature, and painting. But she realized that her weak, frequently ill legitimate sister, who was raised in the manor and didn't study or know anything, was still adored by their father. Her legitimate sister occasionally moved back to the Liu estate for long stays. She despised Liu Shirong and always bullied her, and even though her father knew, he only ordered her to be more accommodating towards her sister. Liu Shirong also despised Liu Xiyun, but she didn't show it. Growing up in these grounds, without even her birth mother by her side, she had to rely on herself and quickly learned to wear a mask. To outsiders, she always appeared gentle, virtuous, and non-aggressive. She had wanted to deal with Liu Xiyun for a while, and this entrance into the palace gave her an opportunity. Free from the watchful eyes of her father and legitimate mother, she had many ways to trip up Liu Xiyun. In her eyes, I was merely a convenient tool in one of her plans. In her grand scheme, she could fake a deep bond with me with just a sprinkle of kindness, kill me off, then pin the blame on Liu Xiyun. As the one who had the deep bond with me, Liu Shirong could then logically demand justice for me, calling for the officials to severely punish Liu Xiyun. This might even let her father see how malicious Liu Xiyun was and grow disgusted with her. But she didn't expect that I could leave the hall of diligent government unscathed. From a certain perspective, Liu Shirong was the one who resembled Liu Qingxi the most, being both hypocritical and cunning. While Liu Xiyun was more like my mother in her younger years, spoiled since childhood, arrogant, foolish, malicious, and willful. When the palace maidens wanted to lock Liu Shirong away, she broke free, trampled fiercely on the torn handkerchief pieces, and looking at me, filled the room with her laughter to the point of generating tears. "Oh, Liu Tian, you are nothing but a pawn. Nobody cares about you or your trinkets. You've only ever been a pitiful reject." After she was taken away, I walked over silently, picked up the dirty and ragged handkerchief, and buried it under an unknown tree in the courtyard. Then I was urged to board the chariot heading home for a family visit. Every year, the palace would arrange for the palace women and consorts to head home for the new year. I shared a chariot with Liao Xiyun on the way back. She was not fond of me and sulked the whole trip, gazing out the window. But upon arrival, her face involuntarily lit up with joy. She dashed off the chariot, throwing herself at Madame Liu like a chick relying on a mother bird, and started to act effusively fond. Madame Liu and Liu Qingxi looked at her, their eyes full of love and amusement, as if she was still a child. I stood in the cold wind beside them. It was a long time before their small talk ended. Liu Qingxi remembered my presence, turned his head and frowned at me. "Liu Tian, aren't you going to greet your mother?" The person he referred to was Madame Liu, who in name was the only mother I could address. I walked over to Madame Liu and greeted her. She was indifferent in receiving my respect. She took off her pure gold Baifu bracelet and handed it to me. A common ritual in large families when the elders meet the younger generation. Liu Xiyan went to the courtyard of Madame Liu, while Liu Qingxi brought me to his study, asking me for the details of my visit to the morning court. He was not interested in the roles that Liu Shirong and Liu Xiyan played. He only cared about why the tyrant didn't kill me. I answered vaguely. He paced around the study for some time, then suddenly pulled up his sleeves, came up to me, and examined my face closely. He then reached a conclusion. "My son, you are so beautiful. Perhaps the tyrant really does have a liking for you." He took out several packets of poison and asked me to gain the tyrant's favor, then to poison his food. This poison is colorless and odorless. Death comes the moment it is consumed. Everyone has been suffering under this tyrant for a long time. Both common people and the court praise your father for his virtues. If your father could ascend the throne, it would be good for us and for all the people. If you could kill the tyrant and your father accomplishes his great plan, you will be the most respected princess. Your mother will be the queen that everyone bows to. You'll finally live the life of nobility. Seeing me dazed, he raised his hand, seemingly wanting to pat my head, just like any ordinary father-daughter interaction. Yet between us, his hand raised stiffly while I reflexively ducked away. He awkwardly dropped his hand. "Your mother hasn't seen you for a long time. Go see her." He tempted me with wealth and honors and threatened me with my mother's life. He boldly showed me his ambition because he held my weaknesses, and he was not afraid that I would leak his plan. I took the several packs of poison obtusely and left the room. I followed the servant to my mother's courtyard, and halfway there, veered off beyond the flowery path, carefully sneaking back to Liu Qingxi's study along the route that I remembered. I stood by the window behind the study, watching my own lady-in-waiting reporting my situation in the palace to Liu Qingxi. His sigh of regret was heavy. At first, I thought she was an useless pawn. Almost killed her, but luckily failed. Twice now, she has survived under his hand. Surely, Liu Tian must be special in his eyes. My pupils unconsciously dilated, as if comprehending something. So it turned out that on that day, the palace maid who pushed me out of the crowd was indeed arranged by Liu Qingxi. He wanted me to be executed as soon as I entered the palace for colliding with His Majesty, so that the fact that he replaced Liu Xiyun with me would never be discovered. My biological father, the first time he saw me in Lu City, he never intended to let me live. And now, he is still plotting to send me to my doom, to fulfill his ambitions. I can't quite articulate how I feel. I left in a daze, broke 2 newly bloomed winter sweet branches, and then met with the leading serving girl who was looking for me nearby. I feigned surprise. I smelled the fragrance of winter sweet on the way and wanted to pick some for my mother. I didn't expect to get lost. Fortunately, you found me. In this large mansion with the winding corridors, it's normal to get lost due to its complex routes. combined with her possible underhand orders from Liu Qingxi, who didn't want me to remember the location of the study, she deliberately took me on a few detours. She didn't expect that I could remember all the routes and even find shortcuts. The maidservant obviously believed me. Her suspicions faded, and she proceeded to lead me to where my mother was. After a long separation, it seemed that my mother was not so insane. She had been preparing lotus seed and lily soup to welcome me, asking about my recent situation, like a normal mother. When we ran out of small talk and fell into silence, she clumsily tried to tell me stories like before. After some time, she seemed to finally realize the awkward detachment between us and became quiet. After a moment, she gravely asked the question that most concerned her. "Liu Tian, are you favored in the palace?" My hand, holding the soup spoon, paused. Then I said, "No one is favored in the palace." My mother moved closer to me, forcing me to look at her. She asked again, "You have met Liu Qingxi, haven't you?" I don't know what she's trying to say. Hesitant, I answered, "Yes, I have." My mother suddenly became inexplicably agitated, with clear-eyed madness and resentment looming in her eyes. "Remember, he is not your father. He is the enemy of you and me. Liu Tian, you are my child. I know you well. You are a bright kid and have inherited the looks of your mother and Liu Qingxi. Beauty and wisdom are both intangible weapons, and now you have a chance to wield them. Get close to the emperor, vie for his favor, and find a way to annihilate the entire family of Liu Qingxi." As she spoke, she seemed to change her mind, shaking her head and muttering to herself, "No, it's too slow, way too slow." Suddenly, as though prompted by an idea, a glint appeared in her eye. She seized my arm, not trying to hide the hatred in her voice. "That's it. You should directly seize an opportunity to kill him with one stroke of the sword. Liu Tian, as long as he dies, I will be set free." She planned how I should kill Liu Qingxi to avenge her, never considering how I could survive undamaged, much like when Liu Qingxi asked me to poison the tyrant. She never thought about it. Suddenly, my heart felt heavy, an indescribable discomfort becoming clearer. Perhaps it was because I had been silent for too long. My mother finally glanced at me with a lack of patience, long since having discarded her pretense of a nurturing mother persona. She stared at me with cold eyes, demanding an answer. "Liu Tian, will you take revenge for your mother or not?" I opened my mouth, only to discover that I had no voice. After a moment of silence, I neither agreed nor disagreed. I gently pushed the bowl of lotus seed and lily soup back to her, saying in a low voice, "Mother, do you remember? I'll die if I eat lotus seeds. I have a severe allergy to lotus seeds that once nearly cost me my life. As a child, when I was starved and didn't have food to eat, I once waded through freezing water in winter to pick the remaining lotus seed pods from ponds that others didn't want. After laboring for half a day in the bone-chilling water, I gathered a small handful of dried lotus seeds. I cherished these seeds, swallowing them one by one. That night, my stomach ached so bad that I rolled on the ground. There were hives all over my body. My mother, fearing that I had contracted a contagious disease, banished me from the house. I was shrinking on the verge of death in the straw pile when my aunt luckily came to send something. She took me down the hill overnight to the village's barefoot doctor. It was diagnosed that I had an allergic reaction. If I had eaten a few more seeds, I would have died. Since then, I never ate lotus seeds again. But every summer, I would always do some chores for the owner of the lotus pond, exchanging some bad-looking lotus pods and bringing them back home to make soup, because my mother liked sweet lotus seed soup. She said she understands me. I find the saying both laughable and heartbreaking. If she truly understood me, she wouldn't have cooked her favorite lotus seed soup pretending to welcome me. From her rigid face, I stepped out, opened the door, gasping for fresh air. But the feeling of suffocation in my heart just wouldn't lighten. In the evening, there was a family feast. Madame Liu sent someone to invite me to dine together. Officially, I was listed under Madame Liu's name as the foster daughter of Lu Qingxi, also her daughter. Lu Shirong was not present. Lu Shiyan sat with her parents. During a family feast, no formalities were required. Lu Qingxi and Madame Liu constantly served her favorite dishes. Gradually, I noticed that actually all the dishes served were her favorites. I sat alone at the end of the table, with a feeling of incompatibility that was strangely familiar. Lu Xian suddenly became unhappy halfway through the meal. When Lu Qingxi inquired, she stared at me suggestively. "Our family is rejoicing in reunion. I don't like the presence of an obtrusive stranger ruining the atmosphere." Consequently, halfway through the meal, Lu Qingxi asked me to leave early, instructing the kitchen to prepare my supper separately. I didn't go to the kitchen as told, but left the mansion and aimlessly wandered the streets. As evening fell, the market streets were bustling. Lanterns hung high, people were huddled together. The constant yelling of vendors filled my ears, and the festive ambiance surrounded me from all sides. I saw a child being held, pestering his parents to buy him a sugar figure. His parents reluctantly but dotingly chose the biggest one for him. The woman selling wonton was beating her grandson because he had fallen into the mud while trying to catch a bird's nest. A lady about to get married was picking jewelry with her mother and sisters for her dowry. An old lady with her mother, who was even older, was having a casual talk with her neighbors. I, like a lonely ghost, meandered in their hustle and bustle. Gradually, the night fell deeper. The vendors along the street began to pack up. The lights dimmed, the pedestrians dwindled. And as I was walking, I was stopped. I raised my head, only to realize that I had unknowingly reached a small gate leading to the imperial palace, which was actually quite near to the duke's mansion. The guards stopped me, and I hesitated for a moment, asking them, "Can a consort who has left the palace to visit her family return ahead of schedule?" Their faces showed confusion as they heard my question. It's always been the case where concubines leaving the palace were reluctant to part with their family, feeling the reunion time was too short. No one had ever asked to return early before. Someone left to ask for permission. When he returned, he confirmed I could enter. I looked back at my maiden who was trailing behind. "Yous go and report to father. I will return to the palace first." With that, I left her dumbfounded as I stepped into the gate and walked slowly into the distance. Flummies began to fall from the sky. Winter had arrived. Returning to my own palace, I remained restless in my sleep. My hands and feet were icy cold. My whole body was freezing. This year, winter had arrived early. The warmth of charcoal heat yet to be distributed to all the palaces, leaving my entire room without a hint of warmth. In the middle of the night, I sat up, picking up my rabbit doll to cuddle with, huddled within the icy blankets for warmth. My mother never truly understood me. Back when we lived in the mountains, I could dive into the river during the coldest winter wearing thin clothes, dig up chickens hidden by foxes in the snow, brave the dangerous mountains by my lone self to chop firewood in heavy winter, preparing for the Lunar New Year like an adult. When the Chinese New Year arrived, I could hardly bring myself to enjoy the meat, instead saving the painstakingly saved food for my mother and transferring all the firewood I moved back with great effort to her to fend off the cold. She'd grown used to it, so she always thought I was born immune to the cold and had never sewed me a winter coat like other mothers would do for their children. She doesn't know that I'm actually very afraid of cold, perhaps more so than others. That's why I always hold my rabbit doll to sleep, allowing me to rest my mind and fall asleep until dawn. The enduring dull pain in my heart could be temporarily forgotten. What Liu Xirong said was right. To them, I am nothing more than a pawn in their game. Nobody cares about me, from beginning to end. I'm just a pitiful creature no one wants. The sisters I thought were kind to me have been plotting against me from the very beginning. My own father, time after time, pushes me to the edge of death to achieve his own goals. My mother, whom I depend on, only has revenge in her eyes and also urges me to take lives of her enemies with my own life. Everyone takes advantage of me and looks down on me, but no one wanted me. Yet my rabbit was a cherished pet. Every day I would go to the kitchen to ask for the leftover vegetable leaves, scavenge in the weeds of the deserted palace grounds, do my best to find food for it, provide it with a clean and warm little nest, and even tied a beautiful bow on its damaged ear. I found that I had changed. I would rather spend the entire day watching my rabbit eat grass than staying with my mother. Even when they all went home to visit their families, I would stay in the palace, looking for fresh grass for my rabbit, until one day I came back to find it lying on the ground, covered in blood, rigid and lifeless. The beautiful little bow was also stained with blood. Some of the consorts had already returned, and I didn't know whose pet dog had killed my rabbit, carried it off to a distant place. That night, it snowed heavily. I picked up the ragged and rigid rabbit, trudged through the snow step by step, fell down into the soft snow, and the dead rabbit rolled down the small slope under a winter jasmine tree. The flowers were in full bloom. Their fragrance was touching, but I was still extremely distressed. My eyes were hot, the tip of my nose was sour. I bit my lip hard, refusing to let the tears fall out. The long-suppressed suffocation and dull pain were tied in my heart. "Why are you thus aggrieved? Who bullied you?" A man's slow voice came through the snow. I looked up to see the tyrant in his brocade robe and mink fur, standing under the winter jasmine looking at me. Behind him, an eunuch held a palace lantern, and he himself held an umbrella, the heavy snow flickering past his eyes, drifting into the warm orange light. I wiped my face in a daze, only to smear my hands with frosty snow. There were no tears. I clearly did not cry. Why did he say I'm feeling wronged? Do I look very aggrieved? Bewildered, I look at him again. Perhaps at this moment I should stand up to salute the emperor or answer his question, but I remain frozen in the snow, unable to say or do anything, as if I have lost vitality in the falling snow. Fortunately, the tyrant does not seem to mind. His slender hands, fair as jade yet scarred, picked up the stiff rabbit by his feet. He shouted for the eunuch to bring a shovel. The eunuch returned and whispered something in his ear. Then the tyrant realized what happened. "It's just a rabbit. If it's dead, bury it." He pulls me up from the snow, selects a good spot under the wax plum tree, his cold, white fingertips lightly tapping the ground. "Let's bury it here." Is it really just a rabbit? I feel like crying more and more. My heart is in pain. Is it really just a rabbit? No, it's not just a rabbit. It's my emotional sustenance. I didn't need sustenance before. I used to live with my mother in the mountains, and my life was extremely simple, only having contact with my mother from childhood. I used to be easily satisfied. Although my mother often hit and scolded me, watching me with cold eyes at all times, when she is occasionally in a good mood, she would braid my hair and tell me a rather uninteresting story. I would be extremely happy, feeling incredibly honored. But now, doing the same things doesn't make me happy. Like a person living in perpetual night, when one day he arrives in the normal world and sees the light that people take for granted, only then does he realize how dark the night was. When I was suddenly taken out of the deep mountains and thrown into the bustling capital, I encountered many people and things, and saw aspects of life I had never seen before. I spied on the happiness of other people's children like a rat in the gutter. When I chose to raise a rabbit, creating a clean and warm home for it, and tying a little bow onto its crippled ear, Only then did I realize the pathetic state of that child who used to tie braids, so reluctant to undo them. The child who was conscious of the lack of love and too afraid to express any. In the past, the child who harbored a deep respect for his mother, crossing mountains and rivers, risking his own life just to find her. That child who volunteered to stand in for others in deadly circumstances just to protect her. That child who is now too afraid to stand by her side. Offering sincere love to someone who despises oneself only means hurt again and again. The gray and homely rabbit, it's not just a minute source of warmth in the cold winter nights. In some sense, it's a solace. An outlet for my repressed affection, a symbol for me to shower love upon without restraint. Liu Zirong calculated against me. Liu Xinyan driven me away. Liu Qingxi took advantage of me. Even my own mother hurt me. It's not just a rabbit that died. It's the death of all the illusions of warmth in my life. The tyrant himself dug a hole with a shovel, gesturing me to put it in. He gazed at me intently, speaking slowly and deliberately. He said to me again, "A Tao, it's just a rabbit." He said he could easily supply me with another rabbit to comfort me. The most beautiful rabbits from all over the world could be rushed to me, but that's probably not what I wanted. He was right. I didn't want any of those healthy, beautiful rabbits. They weren't my little rabbit. The tyrant covered the soil, handed the shovel to someone by the side, and flipped off the snow from a nearby winter sweep, breaking off a branch. That night, he helped me build a snow rabbit at the same spot where the dead rabbit was buried. He adorned the broken ears of the snow rabbit with the broken winter sweet, the leftover stems scratched upon the ground. He marked 2 patterns. "Gu Liu, my name," he said. I stared at him, not completely understanding. A sudden sense of regret hit me. I had never been to school and couldn't recognize these 2 characters, so I tried hard to remember them as complex patterns. However, after a night's sleep, those patterns in my memory were already blurred. But I might still remember till my next life. Gu Liu, standing under the winter-sweet tree, standing in the snowstorm, spoke to me in his casual, light tone, tinged with a hint of fatigue. Only much later did I gradually understand what he meant. It's just a rabbit. This rabbit is no different from the millions and millions of other rabbits in the world. It was the love I gave it that made it special among millions and millions of other rabbits. The rabbit passed away, taking with it the love I should have received, and the love that should have been bestowed upon me by my kin, leaving me with nowhere to place these emotions. That day, I was overcome with helplessness and personal grief, a painful embarrassment. Gu Liu told me that perhaps I should raise myself like my little rabbit, shower love onto myself unfetteredly, always steadfast in cherishing myself. Thus, I wouldn't have to long for the slightest kindness from others. I would never be unwanted because I would never give up on myself. I would always anchor myself to this world, to be fulfilled, resilient, fearless, and tranquil. From that flurry of heavy snowfall in my previous life, it seemed as if time accelerated with transient and swift changes. Unexpectedly, Gu Liu intervened in the affairs of the harem, took the phoenix seal from the highest-ranking concubine, Liu Guifei, and gave it to me. Liu Xian herself didn't care, but the other people were in an uproar. It was no surprise that they were discussing behind my back. My rank was not promoted. It is an insignificant title. Yet I held the phoenix seal. It was strange and out of the ordinary. However, having this symbol of power, indeed no one dared to openly bully me anymore. As I passed a courtyard, Qi Yu of the guards stopped me. She leaned against the door, arms folded across her chest. "I heard Liu Xian gave you the phoenix seal. I have never seen it. Can you show me?" I invited her into my place and warmed a pot of tea. She admired the seal and wondered. Such a beautiful piece of jade. Liu Xian was said to be fond of Gu Jin since childhood, trained as per the Empress's standard. Who could imagine one day she would willingly give this seal to someone else? She seemed to recall old times and couldn't help express her feelings. I had no idea who Gu Jin was, guessing he must be the former Prince An who was killed by Gu Liu. Qi Yu drained her tea in one go, which had been heated for a while. As she was about to leave, she glanced at me, implying something. Liu Tian, if you can choose, I suggest you avoid too much contact with His Majesty. I held her back, let go of the teapot carelessly, breaking it. I had everyone in the room fetch new tea utensils. When only the two of us were left, I let go of her sleeve and looked at her. Could you be more specific? Qi Yu sighed deeply. Liu Tian, I say this for your benefit. She said I actually lack the ability to survive in this palace. Unequal distribution rather scarcity deals problem. Human nature is same everywhere. I had managed to live peacefully here because I was unremarkable, no conflict in interest with others. Now that I stand out, I might be the target with hidden and evident challenges, hard to avoid or defend against. She said, Liu Tian, you are insightful, but what's the use? You simply do not have the opportunity to grow. You have no family to rely on, no connections, no information, even illiterate. But they were carefully brought up by powerful clans, spent their childhood in a competitive environment. The Emperor is not a kind man. He won't protect you, even if it's a fancy of him for a while. Emperor's fancy doesn't last long. He won't protect you for life. Moreover, Your Majesty tends to act recklessly, which may not result in a good outcome. I wouldn't want to see you getting implicated. Discussing the Emperor in this way could result in the beheading of Wei Qingyu if these words were to leak out. She was not afraid that I might betray her. I didn't respond to her as I didn't know how to. She was right. My existence was already difficult enough. Being a thorn in the side to some people in the palace might make my situation all the more challenging. It was precisely that way at the Plum Blossom Banquet. The royal concubines gathered in the frigid, snowy field, overlooking the piercing cold wind, admiring the snow and flowers, in the name of elegance. They were still composing poems and making music while discussing the interesting matters of the boudoir, in which I couldn't partake. After a round of laughter, they inexplicably become sentimental, implying that the plum blossoms can fall over the red walls, while they are trapped for a lifetime behind the palace walls. The mere walls of the palace managed to confine countless women their entire lives, someone sighed, causing a wave of depression among the crowd. Only I was focused intently on the treetops, planning to pick the most beautiful branches to place beside my bed. Perhaps they found me unemotional and out of place. Maybe my every move was under someone's observation. Someone asked me, "Why are you so silent? Are you thinking of some good phrases or composing poetry?" The crowd's attention turned to me. They provoked me, saying that everyone had come up with words and it was my turn to write a poem for the anthology they planned to keep. Casually, they elevated me. A daughter from Liu's mansion must be gifted. Make sure to compose a good verse and outshine the #1 talented lady in the capital from the Fang family, someone jokingly said. The mentioned eldest daughter from the Fang family laughed along. They were obviously making things difficult for me on purpose. If Wei Qingyu was there, she would have shielded me, but she was not. I felt lost, having no clue about composing poems or any related elegant affairs. Their gazes became puzzled, and the expressions varied. Some even began to laugh out loud. Store from the Lius, picked up from God knows where. An illiterate who can't even recognize a single big character. A sparrow, no matter how high it flies, cannot become a phoenix. How on earth do you expect her to compete with the foremost talented lady? Ridicule and contempt were no longer concealed. Like a born scar publicly critiqued and mocked, I could not dodge the feeling of humiliation. Not until Liu Xian, with her delayed arrival, broke the awkwardness, allowing me to escape. The daughter of the Liu family, though not as illiterate as she's often painted, indeed lacked scholarly prowess. Always used as a comparison with a so-called #1 talent woman in the capital, she could never surpass her rival. Thus, unknowingly, a remark on her arrival pierced through her heart. She threw a heap of poems and drawings, written by the crowd, into the burning furnace. Hence began a squabble, making the usually grand plum appreciation banquet, for the first time, hasty and dramatic in conclusion. Knowing this later, Gu Liu summoned me over, seemingly finding it somewhat amusing, his thin lips slightly upturned, appearing in a cheerful mood. Before I had the opportunity to kneel and pay respects, he helped me up. He asked why I didn't just act like Liu Xian, tossing their words and paintings all into the fire. In somewhat surprise, I looked at him, never imagining that I could be as impulsive as Liu Xian. She has the confidence, I do not. Once dressed in his cloak, Gu Liu seemed ready to head out, standing as his servants arranged his attire. With a tilted head, he glanced at me. "Don't you have a sizable seal?" "Heavy enough to act as a brick. If anyone provokes you, just smash it over their head. No one would dare retaliate, regardless of who they are." Taking a soup ladle from a eunuch, he handed it to me without glancing at my face. Despite his poised and elegant demeanor, his words revealed him to be a tyrannical ruler who took lives lightly. With a casual comment, "You could even kill directly, I've got your back," I dared not hasty reply, lowering my head pretending to daydream. After a gust of icy wind, pine trees and cold plums outside the palace began to shed snow. The soup ladle was warm, reaching the depth of my heart. Gu Liu said, "Accompany me for a walk outside." I dutifully followed behind him, passing through the heavily guarded gate, watching him stroll leisurely through the snow, and finally stopping on the outermost wall of the palace. From afar, you could see the snowy rooftops of the capital city's households, fitting together in regular succession, laid out like a chessboard. He asked me. The group of concubines today were lamenting over the wall about their trapped lives, and you remained silent throughout. What's on your mind? I realized that he seemed fully aware of everything that happened within the palace. If there was anything that he wasn't aware of, it was probably because he didn't want to get involved, or he didn't care to know. Looking at the delicate embroidery on my shoes, I honestly replied, "I was thinking about the winter in Luo City." Winter in Luo City was tough. One could barely eat enough food, nor could they dress warm enough. However, my mother and I at least had a shelter. I've seen too many people struggling to survive, fighting savagely, even over a bowl of rice soup. They view the palace wall as a trap, a cage. But in my eyes, being able to eat enough and dress warmly within these palace walls, where all the luxurious pleasures of the world gather, not having to endure hunger and cold, is already fortunate enough. Those who are hungry aren't able to worry so much. There are many people in the world who spend their entire lives striving to settle down at the foot of the imperial city. Gu Liu gazed at me with his deep eyes, appearing not at all surprised by my thoughts of Luo City. He brushed off the snow on his cuffs, picked up a bow and arrow, and softly sighed. Winter in Luo City is indeed cold. He taught me to shoot arrows, instructing me to aim at the bird in the sky. Do you see that bird? It flies high and far, unbounded. But with the arrow in your hand, you can still shoot it down. Gu Liu drew me into his arms, guiding my hand, aiming at the bird that was swiftly flying across the sky. The world was vast. The bird was but a speck. Draw the bow, string the arrow, bullseye. The bird fell below the city wall. Do you see the wall below? It's the highest wall in the palace, heavily guarded, but with the token in your hand, you can easily step out. Gu Liu stared at me. I think I've got it. The truth he wanted me to understand. He escorted me down the city wall and picked up a dead pigeon outside the palace gate, a letter tied to it. I thought he was just choosing a random game for his amusement. I didn't expect him to intercept someone's secret message. I couldn't understand it, so Gu Liu recited it to me word by word. The gist of it was, someone was planning to assassinate him. They had made plans for a long time, and had several fake palace maids and eunuchs infiltrate his chamber. Yet they found the emperor, who was usually there, gone, and immediately sent a message for conspirators outside the palace to discuss their next move. Accustomed to assassination attempts, Gu Liu took it in stride, casually ordered his subordinates to find another homing pigeon, and sent their message back, pulling out the mastermind. Both inside and outside the palace, all who were involved were apprehended. During those few days, many people in the palace died one after another. Everyone feared for their lives. Since that day, Gu Liu had me go to the palace every day to grind ink for him. As I stepped across the frozen bloodstains, I no longer felt fear. In reality, grinding ink doesn't take much time. So for most of the time, when Gu Liu was idle, he personally taught me to recognize words, one word at a time. He had me copy the texts he had chosen, had the venerable old minister guide me in recitation. It finally dawned on me, he was teaching me to read and write. Others mocked me for being illiterate. Of course, he could send those people to the cold palace for punishment, but of what use would that be? Perhaps everyone would then not dare mention it, but in their hearts, they'd still look down on me. Indeed, that was the case. So I had to study hard. Behind others by more than 10 years of accumulation, I needed to be more dedicated than anyone else. The first word I learned was Gu. The second word was Liu. It was Gu Liu. Not Gu Liu as a pattern I forced myself to memorize, but word for word, stroke by stroke, a name I wrote by my own hand. At first, the old minister was resistant and even detested me. He thought that the emperor was merely trying to use him to curry favor with the women in the harem, a humiliating act. But as time went on and he saw my diligence, he began to soften his views, and then, eventually, he started praising me for my intelligence. He began to regret not meeting me earlier so that he could have taken me as his student. He remarked that it's a pity. Now I can only spend the rest of my life in the harem, haggling and fighting over favor. I could only respond in helplessness, saying there was no jealousy. If he had met me earlier when I was just a little beggar or a little girl in the mountains still wearing thin old clothes during winter, he wouldn't have noticed me at all. It was Gu Liu who noticed me from the sludge, so I was seen by the old man, seen by many others. The imperial palace is not a cage, not meant to contain anyone. How can a mere low wall confine anyone? It's a height you could easily overcome with a ladder. What confines them is their prestigious family they rely on, the entanglements of interest, the wealth and glory, their vision, thoughts, and heart. What confines them is themselves. Because depending on the family to gain a place, one must also represent the family to strive for interests in the palace. Because one enjoys the wealth and prosperity in the palace, free from worries about basic livelihood, so one must follow the palace rules, ask for permission in and out, because gaining something inevitably means losing something else. Even if they do not enter the palace and marry into ordinary official families, they would also be bound by these same shackles. The palace wall ceases to exist, but the wall of interest remains lofty forever. They are all pieces in a chess game. What qualifications do they have to talk about freedom? No matter how far they walk, how high they fly, a turn of the hand of the one in control, the release of an arrow by the archer, fate fluctuates according to others' whims. Likewise, living deep within the imperial palace, emperors, heirs, and dowagers wouldn't feel confined. They are the chess players, the archers, the ones holding the command token. I am a person, first and foremost, then a woman, either a palace concubine or an adopted daughter of the Liu family. A person, possessing a broad, free heart, won't be confined by any wall in the world within herself. A person with a command token at her waist, a bent bow in hand, settled the chess game by placing the piece. Having status, power, and intelligence to use everything well, why worry about not being able to control her own destiny? Gu Liu was telling me, strive to control your own destiny. After I had become skilled at archery, Gu Liu took me to a place, the large military camp stationed outside the capital city. The northern foreign enemies had provoked us. After a long period of warfare between the two sides, we finally pacified the frontier. The army returned with their spoils of war. Ideally, the emperor should have gone, along with his relatives and ministers, to celebrate their achievements and reward the triumphant soldiers. Whenever there was an event that required the presence of the women from the harem, Gu Liu would usually ignore it. However, this time he unexpectedly conformed to the rules and took along a large entourage. With the increase in the number of people, there were all sorts of individuals, and undercurrents were swirling. Gu Liu called me to the front into his own horse-drawn carriage. On the journey, he showed me the scenery, stopped at temples to taste vegetarian dishes made by monks. We went hunting with bows and crossbows, and then roasted the hunted wild deer and pheasants. We watched the convoy of carriages in the back, discussing the political intrigues among the group, an amusement to pass the time. Upon reaching our destination, we held an extravagant ceremony. Then Gu Liu took me to a place where slaves were being held. Inside, there was a makeshift animal fighting arena where flesh and blood flew rampantly. The defeated enemy's people were all made slaves, held in small cages, waiting to be chosen to fight like beasts. The soldiers had set up a gambling ring around it. Life was unpredictable in the battlefield. High pressure, high risk. This was their rare chance to vent their stress. Their excitement heightened upon seeing the arrival of the emperor. Gu Liu stood on the high platform for a while, watching the primitive fight. He seemed uninterested and said casually to the military officers following him, "It's just repeated skirmishing, quite monotonous." He suggested lazily, "Why not change it to something more entertaining?" More entertaining would mean replacing the lowly and ugly slaves with noble and beautiful ladies. Having them fight with beasts, the scene would be pathetically brutal, fascinatingly bloody, absurd yet thrilling. His own words were foolish, but the crowd was genuinely eager to see this. Gu Liu's gaze swept across the women from the harem. They unconsciously panicked as his eyes finally rested on one of them. He gently raised his hand, signaling for the guards to send her into the arena. The woman panic-strickenly pleaded for help, but still she was tossed into the bloody arena, facing a malevolent dog that had been starved for days. I recognized her. She was the concubine who had publicly ridiculed and troubled me a while ago. She was also the one who had deliberately set a dog on my rabbit to amuse herself, knowing how much I cherished it. This dog, she probably raised it with her own hands. Unconsciously, I glanced at Gu Liu, who was loungily seated at the head, looking rather listless. Sensing my gaze, he looked up at me. After a moment, he had people fill the semi-enclosed terrace with fires, inviting me to stay next to him at the warmest place, whispering, "Cold?" I hesitated and shook my head, but didn't speak. Beneath us, a noble-born concubine, covered in wounds from the famished dog's savage attacks, was screaming tragically, her previous poise and grace nowhere to be found. She was utterly disheveled. Gu Liu ordered someone to throw a knife down. The woman quickly picked it up, and without hesitation thrust it into her once-beloved dog's head, lacking any skill or restraint, stabbing and stabbing until the dog finally stopped moving. When she was pulled away, her eyes were red and her expression dazed and manic. The crowd below was in an uproar with excitement, but the concubines on the higher stage were as quiet as cicadas in the cold. They had all been pampered and sheltered. This scene was beyond their experience. Some even fainted from fear. In the midst of this silence, Gu Liu suddenly started clapping. His eyes were gleaming with amusement as he asked them, "What's the matter? You don't find it exciting enough?" They all quickly shook their heads, forcing awkward smiles to show their agreement. Gu Liu, unpredictable as he was, let his smile fade. His expression became nonchalant. "Indeed," he said lightly, "it wasn't all that spectacular." His gaze drifted to the ministers and landed on Liu Qingxi. The earlier scheme of the prime minister? Now that was something. Liu Qingxi broke out in a cold sweat. Gu Liu continued to watch the terrified expression of the prime minister for a while, before making a shocking suggestion. Why not send down the 3 daughters he had sent to the palace, and see who could survive the mouths of the beasts? By beasts, he was referring to the half-grown brown bear caged nearby, a tribute from a small nation recently received. A little further, Liu Shirong, who had not been seen for a while, was brought over. She had been kept in the cold palace for this period of time, presumably suffering a great deal. She looked gaunt and haggard, a shadow of her former self. Li Shiyun's eyes widened in shock. How dare they compare her to those inferior commoners? But she didn't dare say anything. She just glared at Liu Qingxi, looking aggrieved and indignant. Liu Qingxi was sweating profusely, trying to dissuade them weakly, but it was of no use. I, on the other hand, calmly accepted the arrangement. Gu Liu must have had his reasons for doing this. I stood up to go down when a cold wind blew and I sneezed. Gu Liu frowned. He pretended to be concerned about my catching a cold, suggesting that my personal maid go instead. The aghast handmaid, shaking like a leaf, was pushed down. 3 of them were shoved into the arena. Liu Shiyun, biting her lip in humiliation, took off the toughest hairpin and clutched it in her hand. Liu Shirong was silent, staring at the ground, while the maid cried incessantly throughout. Gu Liu lost his patience, too noisy. Upon Gu Liu's request to silence the wailing maid, a bow and arrow were presented to Liu Qingxi. Liu Qingxi, trembling, shot the maid dead. The pawn he had been grooming for years and had spent a great deal of effort inserting into the palace was destroyed by his own hand. He must have felt a deep regret. By this time, the iron cage had been opened. The beast, smelling the stench of blood, became agitated. It sniffed around the corpse but didn't seem too interested, and instead started eyeing the other 2. Clearly, living prey was more enticing to it. Gu Liu finally seemed to find the situation interesting. He handed an arrow to Liu Qingxi. "Prime Minister, given a chance, who would you save between the 2? Or would you kill the bear and save both?" Gu Liu's deep phoenix eyes glinted with a wicked smile. The fierce creature was a diplomatic gift from another country. If he killed it upon arrival, he could potentially be blamed for inciting international tension, which could affect his career. Between his career and his own daughter, which one would he choose? Liu Qingxi held up the bow, his hand shaking uncontrollably. The 2 people ahead were already fleeing in panic. The fancy hairpin of Liu Xiang was completely useless. She was crying out for rescue to Liu Qingxi. Liu Shirong was also running, glancing towards her father with hopeful eyes in her fleeing gap. There was no more time for him to hesitate. Liu Shirong closed his eyes, and when he opened them again, he had made his choice. His arrow pointed towards Liu Shirong, piercing her thigh. Liu Shirong fell to the ground, originally running ahead, but now lagging behind. Liu Shirong wanted her to block the brown bear, enabling Liu Xiang to escape. Between his daughter and his official career, he chose the latter. Among his 2 daughters, he chose Liu Xiang. As the one being abandoned, Liu Shirong's hopeful eyes instantly turned hollow. She laughed self-mockingly, unsurprised yet couldn't help hold back her resentment. A sense of unwillingness transformed into a survival instinct. She gritted her teeth, pulled the arrow out of her leg, and stabbed the approaching beast in the eye. After being slapped to the ground by a huge claw, she was unable to get up, coughing blood while the bear began to feast on her leg. She seemed to be on the verge of death. From atop a high platform, I watched for a long while. Eventually, I took the bow and arrow from the shocked Liu Qingxi, pulled the bowstring, and shot an arrow through the other eye of the bear. Letting go of the bow and arrow, I realized my palms were sweaty from the most accurate shot I had ever made. Now utterly blind, the beast roared and dashed around wildly. Lu Shirong glanced at me subconsciously, and once realizing what had happened, she mustered up the energy to run away. Gu Liu disregarded my presumption. When he heard others saying that I was overstepping my bounds, he didn't even bat an eye. After the brutal and bloody farce ended, Lu Shirong was terribly frightened. She fell ill and remained indoors since, living a secluded life. Liu Shirong was still sent back to the neglected imperial palace. Upon running into each other that day, she called out to me, "Do you not resent me? Why did you save me? How come I didn't realize earlier that you were such an indiscriminate do-gooder?" Her tone wasn't exactly friendly. She was used to being prickly to everyone. I looked at her standing in the blizzard in her shabby winter clothes. The exposed skin was scarred with frostbite, my gaze calm and indifferent. If you were to run headfirst into a tree and die right now, I wouldn't save you. Back then, I did not want to become someone who could watch a beast devour a living person without feeling anything. There is nothing to resent. She has received her deserved punishment, and it is no longer worth my concern. Actually, I have always been blunt in my response to hatred. Perhaps the numerous adversities I met since childhood have led me to reflexively protect myself by blocking out all unpleasantness. I remember all those who once bullied me, and I know that I need to retaliate. However, these issues didn't occupy my entire life, and they require the right time. I never expected that Gu Liu remembered everything one by one. He was not only punishing those people on my behalf, but also teaching me the art of grasping people's hearts and dealing with them at crucial moments. Later, as winter passed and spring arrived, from the glow of summer to the fall of autumn, years went by silently. I mastered the art of calligraphy, read through all the classics, and never again felt embarrassed because of my lack of knowledge. Holding the imperial seal in my hand, but with a low-ranked title, indeed brought me a lot of trouble. Gu Liu would not help me solve these problems, but he would guide me and teach me how to manage when I occasionally felt at a loss. Little by little, he taught me how to secure my position in the unpredictably turbulent center of power. If I could stand firm in such a complex situation, then in any future circumstances or dilemmas, I could handle everything with ease. I grew up very quickly and gradually understood his intentions. Wei Qingyu once said that I actually have no survival ability in this imperial palace, and Gu Liu cannot protect me forever. I never indulged in the illusion that someone would protect me forever, so I didn't know how to respond. At that time, we never imagined that Gu Liu would gradually teach me how to stand my ground. We're all temporary passers-by in each other's lives. Some leave deeper imprints, while others, lighter ones. No one can provide lifelong support for another. The only one who can offer never-ending support is oneself. The one who never gives up on themselves, who controls their own fate, who is thoughtful, capable, and has faith. Gu Liu, who evolved into a tyrant, was not a good man. He was ruthless and unpredictable, capable of committing heinous acts without a second thought. Yet he was always good to me, both in the past and present. He is the tyrant of all, but my own knight in white. He is the devil to everyone else, but my personal deity. He told me to love myself, instilled faith in me, and helped me grow. He, a broken entity, transformed me, a suddenly thrust into the chaotic world. Externally robust, but internally flustered and insecure, into a full and composed self. He buried my little rabbit and stacked a snow bunny to comfort me. People keep pets not only to receive love, but also to give love. Gu Liu told me to treat myself as if I were my own little rabbit. Much later, on an ordinary day, a thought brushed across my mind and I suddenly realized. In a certain sense, a Tao was also Gu Liu's little rabbit. I learnt from Wei Qingyu and started writing letters to my family, but when I finished one, I found no one to send it to and realized that maybe I didn't miss my mother as much as I thought I did. So I began to write daily letters to Gu Liu, telling him about the trivial things of the day. In his response, Gu Liu would use his cinnabar pen to casually draw a small flower on my letter to show he had read it. I embroidered safety amulets for him and Wei Qingyu. Wei Qingyu, holding the dragon embossed one, sourly remarked that the black embroidery took more effort. I ate her overly sweet pastries in the summer and vomited at night, only to find out that they contained lotus seeds. Wei Qingyu never used lotus seeds in her cakes after that. Then I started thinking about my mother, whom I hadn't seen in a long time. Look, I'm allergic to lotus seeds, which is actually a very easy thing to remember. During the Mid-Autumn Festival, I accidentally had some alcohol and got so drunk that I had no recollection of running to the Qinjiang Palace, only to trip on the threshold and burst into tears. I don't remember. When snowflakes were falling from the sky, the palace prepared for the new year by pasting couplets on the doors, bright red papers inscribed, not with typical couplets of literary references like in previous years, but simple wishes like, add blessings, add years, add wealth. Later, I found out that after I had fallen down drunk, I hugged Gu Liu's leg and cried, stuttering that I finally understood. The word add implies redundancy, and I was always the redundant one for everyone. After I left the mountains, everyone called me Liu Tian. Even my mother would point her finger at me, telling me how happy she would have been if I was not born. Only Gu Liu always called me a Tao. He never called me Liu Tian, but he was telling me. The word add means adding blessings and years, lasting peace year after year. At New Year's, the palace held a grand banquet, and everyone needed to give their New Year greetings to the emperor. Everyone was competing in their literary skills, with their greetings each more eloquently expressed than the last. When it was my turn, I painstakingly wrote a sentence on a blessing lantern. May you live a long life of 100 years, safe and sound every year. The simplest of phrases sent up into the vast night sky along with thousands of others. The many lanterns combined into a bright Milky Way. Gu Liu didn't think less of my simple greeting. Without me knowing how he could do it, when night turned to day, out of the thousands of blessing lanterns that had fallen far and wide, he searched for and found mine and kept it. It was winter then. After the bitter winter, there would be a warm spring full of blooming flowers. If time in my past life had stopped there, even though it would not consider being perfect, how good it would have been.